how do you actually buy a house? Now, that might seem like a very simple question, but essentially all I'm going to do right now is go through the basic steps of the home purchasing process from the very beginning, what you need to know and do before you even start looking at homes, from the very, very end to closing day and what that looks like. Because let's be fair, a lot of folks, if you haven't been in the home buying, home selling process before, don't really know how it works. So in this video, we're going to quickly go through the around 8 things that you really need to know in this home buying process, just so you can keep that top of mind again and be very prepared to get into the home purchasing, home searching world. Again though, I'm Noah Cochran, a real estate agent here in Columbia, Missouri, here to help, here to provide information, value. Hit me up, call me, email me, show up out of nowhere. I would always love to be assistance. If you're looking for a home, if you're looking to sell a home, anything above, just want to talk about something, hit me up. Now, what are the things that you need to know in the home buying process? Okay, so step 1 is probably everyone's least favorite step ever, and that is figure out what you can afford and then get pre-qualified for that. Now, unless you struck it rich somehow and have some good cash on hand, some folks do. That's awesome. If you do, your home buying process is going to be much smoother. You can skip half of these steps. It doesn't really matter. But for most folks, you're going to have to go out and get a loan, usually just a conventional loan. I'm not really going to get into the different qualifications of VA or FHA. I'm not really getting into qualifications much here. Most of the time, you're going to go out, you're going to get a conventional loan, and you have to get pre-qualified for that loan. Now, you have to get pre-qualified for any loan, but just talking about the conventional right now, you'll get pre-qualified, and you'll usually get pre-qualified based off your credit score and your income. Now, there's a bunch of other things that these bankers and lending agents use when it comes to how much they're willing to give you to purchase something. But usually, again, it has to do with credit score, it has to do with your income history in general, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing you need to do is go out and find a trusted lending agent, talk to that lending agent, and come up with what you can afford. What's the maximum amount of money you can borrow? What money do you need for that down payment? If you're a first-time home buyer, you might be able to get a deal where you can pay 3 to 5%. Have you bought a home in the last 3 years, then maybe you're going to have to do up to 20%, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll find out what your down payment needs to be, how much money you can borrow, and that will tell you how big of a home, how costly of a home you can purchase. So to find a lending agent, I would really just recommend going to whatever bank you currently hold your money with and talking to lending agents there. Look up some reviews, look up some people that have the highest reviews in that bank and talk to them. Try to ask for them in that bank. That's really what I did here in Central Missouri. I bank with Central Bank, and so I called it with Central Bank, met some great people over there, and they helped me get pre-qualified way back in the day before I got into this business. Very simple, honestly. Once you get into it, the lending officers are very, very kind, usually if you find a good one, and helpful, but there are a lot of good lending agents. So if you are working with a realtor, which we'll get into in a minute, or just know someone that might know lending agents, ask them who they recommend, if they have any recommendations. Often, if someone's been in this industry before, they'll know someone great to work with that has all the information you're going to need. Now, step 2 is to search for homes in that price range you can afford. Now, when I'm talking and working with buyers, I usually recommend to only search for homes under that price range. Sometimes you can get reevaluated if you're searching over a couple months and get qualified for a higher amount, but it's usually safer just to stay within that price range. Just search for homes in that price range. Hopefully though, there are still a fair amount of options within that price range. Of course, the higher you are pre-qualified, the more options you'll have, but even if you're in the lower end, hopefully you'll still get a good amount of options. And in Columbia, generally, you'll still have a good amount of options, even if say you're under that 300K price range. If you go out of Columbia, it sometimes gets harder. Usually they're fixer-uppers or they have land making them more expensive, but Columbia, you can usually find some decent homes for under 300K. Now, it is a hotter market down there, so usually you have to buy them relatively quick, but there are options. Now, real quick here, I do want to say that if you're going to work with a buyer's agent, this would be the time to start working with them, or even before this. Why? Because they can help you search for these properties. They can get you on searches, they can search for the MLS, they can do some of the brunt work and kind of narrow down easier, send you a bunch of listings, help you narrow it down so it's not as overwhelming. Now, some folks like to do all the searching on their own anyway, that's perfectly all right, but if you're tight on time and you want someone to kind of search for you and send you some properties and kind of narrow them down so you don't have to actually go view as many in person, kind of qualify them better, then working with an agent at this point can be very useful. I do this for a lot of buyers, searching, put them on searches sometimes, automated searches, sometimes searching manually myself. Regardless, this can be very useful. Now, should you work with a buyer's agent or not? Well, here's the deal. If you're very, very comfortable and confident with your skills and knowledge in the home buying process, like you've done this several times before, you probably don't need a buyer's agent. To be fair, you're probably not watching this video either if you're very confident and skilled and knowledgeable in this area, but if you are, you probably don't need a buyer's agent. Let's be perfectly honest. However, if you aren't, they can be very useful. And even if you are relatively confident, they can still be used and useful to you, just doing some of that brunt work and paperwork and searching and scheduling and phone calls, etc., etc. But the most important part is using a buyer's agent is usually 99% of the time. Of course, you want to make sure before you go through and write a contract, but 99% of the time, they are free to use. The only thing, usually, at least in local Missouri area, that you will ever have to pay to a buyer's agent, again, this may not be true for other states, but in Missouri, the only thing you'll ever actually pay that broker or that company that you work with is like a $200 or $400 insurance fee at closing, because that covers the insurance that protects you and the agent in the home buying process that broker pays for. But as a buyer, unless it's some extraneous circumstance where the seller demands it, you will never pay any commission. Now, if a situation did arise where someone was demanding you did, you have complete power and control to say yes or no, like, do I want to do this or do I not? Like, buyer has complete control and power whether they accept a deal where they have to pay commission. But in 99.9%, and I'm not exaggerating, of deals, buyers pay zero commission to their agent and the seller has to pay both agents. Now, you might say, that seems really unfair. Actually, though, it's not unfair, because it's kind of a transfer system where the seller, when they buy a home, if they're about to buy a home, whatever it may be, is about to do the same thing, right? So they pay the 6% for the home sale, but then when they go buy a home with their agent, they don't pay that agent anything, the next seller. So it's kind of a transfer system to the next agent. It's just how it's really always worked, because buyers specifically are usually needing more of that money at closing. Sellers are getting that big paycheck, so they're able to pay more at that moment in time. And that's really why the system's set up that way, where buyers are paying little commission. But here's the deal. If you're going to buy a home, and you're going to live in it for several years, maybe a lot of years, then you will not be paying any commission to that agent. So that was kind of a detour, but if you are planning to work with an agent, just remember that they are essentially free. You're not paying any commission. Of course, you want to talk through everything, make sure everyone's on the same page, but you will not be paying any commission to that agent. Just make sure, though, that you find a good agent. Just because you're not paying them anything doesn't mean you want to work with someone who's mediocre and doesn't actually do their job. All right, next step would be to schedule those showings and go view those homes in person. Now, I already made a video about things to look out for a showing. And again, if you're working with an agent, hopefully they can help you through this process of scheduling all that, dealing with listing agents, asking questions, looking at sellers' disclosures, etc., etc. But feel free to go check out that video on my channel about things you should keep an eye out for when you're on that showing. In general, though, just analyze and monitor all the different things on that house, make sure it fits you. And then once you find the house that you want to purchase, comes the next step, making that offer. Now, at this point on, the agent definitely becomes useful. Again, if you're confident in paperwork and things, there are easy ways to find forms, write up contracts. I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of agents exaggerate how hard it is. It's not like the worst thing ever. However, it can get a little complicated, especially if you're needing more contingencies. The more contingencies you have, whether it be you're wanting inspections, appraisals, loan stuff, the more complicated it can get, and the more useful an official offer contract with an official agent to help you write it up can be. Additionally, when a seller receives an offer written up like this, they will view it as much stronger, like this person is legit, and thus they will consider it and give it much more consideration, especially if you're ever in any sort of competition. The next step, though, is that you will have to put down some earnest money. So in an official offer contract that buyer's agent would help you write up, that earnest money would be in there, and you would take that deposit, and at least in Columbia, Missouri area, you'll go to Boom Central Title or some other title company. Boom Central Title is great. It's easy to just go online and put in that money, send that over to Boom Central Title. They will hold that in escrow, that earnest money, until either closing or someone backs out. Now, something to remember here, though, is that these contingencies, and again, you're most likely going to want an inspection contingency, and if you're getting a loan, then you're going to have an appraisal contingency, the bank is, and you might have other contingencies as well, that if you back out during one of these in writing in the offer contract contingencies, that you will keep that earnest money. So that earnest money is not going away. If you back out of this deal due to a contingency within the set out timelines of that contingency, you will not lose that money. However, if you just back out for no reason with no timeline and no contingency, or outside of the contingency's timelines, then you will lose that earnest money because you just wasted that seller's time. So that's something, again, you'll talk over with your agent or just people that know, or maybe you already know this, but just talk, keep that top of mind. Make sure you know what's going on. Make sure you know your timelines. Make sure everything is managed and clear so you're never confused and you never mess up when it comes to that earnest money. Now, these next steps, and I'll maybe make a video on these individually in the future, but the next steps are to go through that inspection period, that appraisal period, that loan information period, that title information period. Essentially, you'll get inspectors out there, get inspector reports. If you want stuff fixed, you'll send that over to the seller. An appraisal will come in. You'll see, does it appraise to the value that you're purchasing at? If it does, great. If it's above, better. If it's below, you'll have to negotiate with the seller. Sometimes you'll just have to end up paying that gap. Sometimes you'll make the seller pay some of that gap. Lots of different things. But again, you'll work through these different contingencies of the appraisal inspection. You'll get sent loan information. You'll get sent the title commitment with the title information, etc., etc. And then you'll get to closing day. You'll do that final walkthrough. Once all that's figured out, you're still wanting to go through the purchase. You didn't back out on any of those contingencies. And when closing day comes around, you're all set and ready to buy. You'll hit that closing table, usually in person. You can actually not do it in person if you don't want to, but typically it's easier just to go do it in person. You'll get that title. You'll get that ownership to that house. You get those keys. All the money will be transferred, and you will be all set with your new home. So I went through that rather fast, but essentially you want to get pre-qualified first. You want to see what you can afford. Then you want to get on those searches, search for properties in your area based on your price parameters and your square footage or whatever parameters. Then you want to go look at those homes, analyze those homes, find one that fits you. Then you're going to get that paperwork. If you're working with the buyer's agent, again, this will be a lot easier, but regardless, you need to get that paperwork to write up a strong offer that also has this contingency set out if you want any contingencies. Once you get that wrote up, you'll start through the inspection process, the appraisal process, the loan process, all those different things. Usually takes about 30 days, sometimes a little more, sometimes can be less. Hit that closing day, deal with all the paperwork, which again, the lending agents and the closing agents will deal with that for you. It's not a big deal. If you're working with a buyer's agent, they'll also help manage all of that. be a smooth closing. Hopefully, you never know, but hopefully it'll be a smooth closing and you are all done. So in the most simple format, that was how you purchase a home in Columbia, Missouri, in Central Missouri in 2025. Hope that was of some value. If you want any further information on any specific detail, hit me up, leave a comment below, tell me what you think, maybe tell me something I missed. Always feel free to reach out though. Again, I'm Noah Cochran. I would love to help in any capacity that I can. Love to help search for homes in Columbia, Missouri if you're wanting to relocate here or whatever it may be for y'all. Always feel free to reach out. But until next time, y'all have a good one.